Story 1. I pressed a secret button on a vending machine. It gave me something that's still watching me. I don't even know why I went to that bus station. It was 2:47 a.m. Middle of nowhere. The place looked abandoned, like it had been peeled out of time and left to decay in a forgotten corner of the world. Cracked tile. Buzzing lights. The smell of warm soda, mildew, and something oddly sweet, like candy left in the sun too long. And there it was. The vending machine. It didn't belong there. It looked older than the building around it. The glass was warped. The buttons had letters and numbers that seemed to subtly shift when I looked away. There was no brand name, just flickering static where the screen should be, and rows of snacks I didn't recognize. Whispered peanuts. Bitter chews. Morsels of regret. Granny's wet mints. The longer I stared, the more I felt like I remembered those names. Like I'd seen them in dreams I forgot on purpose. I put in $1 and hit B7. The machine made a sound I can only describe as wet breathing. Then it dropped a bag. Whisper Krispies. They looked like potato chips, thin, greasy, glimmering with a faint rainbow sheen like oil on water. I ate one. As soon as I crunched down, I heard a whisper, not in my ears, but somewhere behind my eyes. Not a voice I knew. Not even a language I could name. But I understood it anyway. Do not look at the mirror in the train station bathroom after 3:13 a.m., it said. He watches. I swallowed. My hands were shaking. I looked down. The bag was empty. I hadn't eaten them all. I'd only had one. Something else had finished them. Then I pressed A8. I couldn't help myself. Granny's wet mints. The packaging looked like it had been sewn shut with something fine and fragile, maybe hair. It felt damp. Warm. The mints inside glistened. One of them blinked. Stitched into the bag was a message. Eat one if you miss someone gone. Eat two if you want them back. Eat three if you're ready to go with them. Don't eat four. Please. I ate five. Mint one, I remembered someone I've never met, Great Aunt Petunia. She wore lavender and collected porcelain eyes. My heart ached for her. Mint two, I heard the creak of her cane in my hallway. She was humming a lullaby made of numbers. Mint three, my body began to flicker. I lost my weight. My outline. My sense of self. Mint four, she appeared. Not as a person. As a shape. Smiling. Teeth like keys. Eyes like doorways. Bones bending like ribbon. Mint five, I was elsewhere. Sitting in a wicker chair under a sky of black glass. Watching a garden grow backward. The flowers opened into buds. Bees crawled into their own hives in reverse. A vending machine stood across the lawn, rusted over with names I didn't know I'd written. That's when I saw it. A button near the bottom of the machine. No label. Just a soft, sticky click. A hidden compartment slid open. Inside, a piece of taffy. Wrapped in wax paper so yellowed it looked fossilized. Written in red crayon. Do not chew. A note fell from the folds. Swallow whole for a second chance. Spit out for the truth. Chew, and stay forever. I spit it out. The taffy hit the ground and twitch spasmed like a stunned insect. A wet sigh echoed from the ceiling tiles. Then it showed me the truth. The machine wasn't built. It was grown. Every snack a seed. Every purchase a trade. It doesn't want money. It wants curiosity. Cravings. Cracks in your sense of reality. The vending machine is part of something older than cities. Older than memory. It's not evil. It's lonely. When I blinked again, I was back. Bus station. 2:47 a.m. The machine was normal. Pepsi. Lay's. Twinkies. Nothing strange. But my pockets were heavier. Inside. One untouched purple taffy. Still warm. A coin with a hole in the middle and an eye that never blinks. A note, don't come back. Unless you're lonely. I haven't touched the taffy. But sometimes, I dream of chewing it. And when I wake up, I can still taste mint. Story 2. I was a cop on the most haunted highway. Then my wife vanished there. They only come out after dark. Always targeting lone motorists who find themselves stalled between mile markers 189 and 206. It's no secret there's something wrong with that stretch of I-35. The disappearances that have happened there aren't exactly a mystery to those who know where to look. And now, because of me, there's one more name to add to the list. People say the whole place just feels off. There's a weight in the air that clings to your lungs, to your thoughts. Something heavy and cold that creeps up from the pavement and the trees. I often wonder what goes through the minds of those who vanish, what they feel in those final moments. The panic. The isolation. The dread of knowing no one is coming. We do what we can to prevent it. But it's never enough. That stretch of highway is the only one in the state lined with no standing signs, and the fines for ignoring them are astronomical. At first glance, it seems ridiculous, until you understand what we're really trying to keep people from doing. And if you're observant, you'll notice the fence at the tree line is much taller than anywhere else. Still, people sometimes find a way over. The local folklore practically writes itself. But the thing is, no ghost story, no urban legend, no whispered campfire tale, can hold a candle to the truth. And the truth? It's worse than any nightmare. As far as I know, only one person has ever come back from the other side of that fence. He survived, but whatever he saw, whatever happened, shattered something inside him. He's never spoken about it, not to anyone. Some things, once seen, can't be explained. Or forgotten. What haunts that forest can't be tracked. Can't be caught. It's a presence you only understand by the emptiness it leaves behind. The sudden silence where someone once stood. Before last week, I had a perfect record. No losses on my watch. Something I think my wife, Marta, would have been proud of, if she were still here. Marta's the reason I took this post. I've been in law enforcement for decades, but it wasn't until after I lost her that I learned the truth about what happens along that cursed stretch of road. That's when I volunteered to be reassigned, right to the heart of it. Now, I patrol only after sunset, dusk till dawn. My job isn't to write tickets. It's to make sure no one else ends up like she did. For a long time, I blamed myself. Her call came while I was already handling a traffic stop. She said her car had stalled near mile marker 203. I was about 30 miles away, and I didn't hear her message until it was too late. I got there before the tow truck, but by then, she was gone. There are nights when I still reach for her in bed, out of habit, and all I can do is replay that moment in my mind. If I had answered her call. If I had been there with her. If I hadn't been at work. Maybe, just maybe, that side of the bed wouldn't be so empty. Her final voicemail is burned into my memory. "Zach, I'm going to be late," it begins. Her voice sounds strained, trying to stay calm. "I'm fine. I'm fine," she repeats, like she's convincing both of us. "Some guy clipped me. I spun out into the ditch. I'm okay, the car's okay, just a little scraped up. He didn't stop, just kept driving, but I got the plate. It's a vanity plate, and yeah, it fits. Surprised they even allowed it." She rattles off the characters. I've heard them 1,000 times. "AAA's on the way. Everything's fine. I love you. I'll see you when you get home." There's a pause. Then, her voice drops to a whisper. "Do you hear them?" A car door beeps open. Then, a muffled thud, static, as the phone drops. "They found it later," sitting in the driver's seat. I always end the voicemail at that moment, before the silence breaks and those faint, distant sounds start bleeding through. It's too much. And besides, now I know the truth, Marta never had a chance. The second her car left the road, the second she was alone in the dark, it was over. It wouldn't have mattered if I was 30 miles away, or 5. I don't blame the officer who was on patrol that night, either. Our team was short-staffed, and he was already assisting someone else down the road. I got to the scene as fast as I could. I beat the tow truck by minutes. But when I arrived, all I saw was her car. Flashers still blinking. Driver's side door ajar. The night air, usually still and quiet, buzzed with something unnatural, like the static hum of thousands of tiny wings flitting just out of reach. Then I stepped out of my cruiser. And the sound vanished. Replaced by something else. Zach. I froze. It was her voice. Marta's voice. It drifted out from beyond the trees, across the 6-foot fence that separated the road from the dark woods. It didn't sound quite right, strained, distant, but it was her. Without thinking, I ran toward it. The next thing I remember, I was halfway up the fence. I didn't even realize I was climbing. It was like waking up from a dream. That's when the other patrol car rolled up. Officer Brennan, the same one who later had to tell me the truth, stopped me before I could drop over the other side. He told me Marta was already back at the station. In my panicked state, I started to doubt myself. Maybe I had imagined hearing her. Maybe the stress had finally pushed me over the edge. When we arrived back at the station, they buried me in paperwork, in reports, in protocol. Kept me distracted until nearly dawn. And only the next morning, when the sun was high enough, and the forest still enough, did they recover what remained of her. Only then did they tell me everything. Since then, most nights on this job have been uneventful. It's strange how even horror can become routine. Brennan and I patrol our respective zones, checking for stalled drivers, watching for signs. He's the same officer who found me climbing that fence. The same man who broke the news about Marta. We've become used to these nights. The night of my first real call started out just like the others. Brennan was on the radio, halfway through a ridiculous story about some old 80s B-movie he'd watched, when the channel hissed and a dispatch code cut through, H-197. A motorist had called for roadside help near mile marker 197, and the dispatcher immediately routed it to us. They knew better. I was closest. Lights on. Siren blaring. I sped toward the location. The trees around that part of the highway are dense, so thick they turn the road into a tunnel of shadow. My headlights barely touched the edges of it. The lights and sound by time. They serve as a kind of distraction. Something about them, about motion, about presence, keeps whatever lurks in those woods at bay. It's as if they can sense when someone's completely alone, and that's when they move. I thought I was too late. The car was empty. But after a few seconds, my eyes adjusted, and I saw him. The driver. He was already on the other side of the fence. Reaching toward the woods. I called out, and he turned toward me. His face was dazed, blank. In that split second, before everything went quiet again, I thought I heard something coming from the trees. Not a sound exactly, more like a presence, a breath in the dark that carried a voice I almost recognized. I raised my flashlight. The beam caught his face, and his pupils, wide and black like spilled ink, slowly constricted as the light touched them. His gaze sharpened. And then, beyond him, I saw them. Eyes. Dozens, maybe hundreds, of tiny glimmers reflected back at me in the dark. Watching. Hovering in that inky black beyond the trees. And just like that, they were gone. The man blinked. And the shock hit him all at once. He started scrambling up the fence, frantically trying to get away from whatever had called to him. Trying to get to me. After I helped him over the fence, he clutched his arm to his chest, trembling. The wrist was torn open, raw, with exposed bone where the rest of his hand should have been. I radioed for an ambulance while he stood there in complete shock, staring ahead as if his mind was still lost in those woods. I gave him space. Sometimes silence is the only thing you can offer. Eventually, the words came tumbling out, like a dam breaking. His eyes were wide, glassy. He shivered despite the warm summer night. He told me he heard a voice. Not just any voice, one that belonged to someone he had lost. A voice he knew. A voice that called to him from the woods. It all happened in an instant. He said he'd just stepped out to pop the hood and check the engine. And then, the next thing he knew, he was beyond the fence. Already over. He didn't know how. Only that it felt necessary. That he had to find the source of the voice in the trees. He described what he saw there, in the flicker of my flashlight. Just glimpses. Shapes that shouldn't exist. Movements that didn't obey the rules of our world. Images pulled straight from the most twisted corners of the human imagination. I nodded quietly, not pressing him. From what I've heard since, he still hasn't spoken about it again. Even that brief glimpse was enough to shake his sanity. I waited with him until the ambulance arrived, special teams who know how to handle these calls. No questions asked, no disbelief in their eyes. Just calm, practiced efficiency. Once they were gone, I sat alone in my cruiser for a few minutes. And I looked back toward the woods. I thought about Marta. About the voice I heard that night, the one that called to me. About how I got there just minutes too late. When I can't sleep, I still find myself searching those license plates, the vanity tag she read out in her final message. The one that knocked her off the road and drove off without a second thought. I've searched every variation. Nothing. No hits. But that stretch of highway stayed quiet after that night. For a while it was just Brennan and me again, cruising the blacktop, keeping each other company on the radio. Until last week. The night that changed everything. The one I can't stop replaying in my head. It started with a car, one that came flying past me like a rocket. Easily going over 120, swerving so hard I had to pull onto the shoulder to avoid getting clipped. He barely missed me. Then, just seconds later, the crash. The grinding, violent scream of metal. The sound of glass exploding into the air. I spun the wheel and accelerated, racing after him. Didn't take long to find the wreck. He'd plowed straight into a tree, right at mile marker 192. That cursed stretch. If there was any luck on his side, it was that I had been close. Very close. He was banged up, yeah, but somehow still conscious. The car. Completely totaled. I approached carefully, calling out to him. No response. He was staring through me, lost in some fog of shock and fear. I knocked hard on the window, raised my voice, and said I was calling for medical help. That finally seemed to break through the haze. He rolled the window down, and the smell hit me, strong, unmistakable. Like a distillery on wheels. He didn't want help. Didn't want to go in for driving under the influence. Didn't want the consequences. I quickly asked for his license and registration, even though this wasn't a traffic stop in the usual sense, it was more of a rescue. Still, I'd already decided the safest route would be to bring him in for reckless driving. I could administer the breath test later, honestly, even if I waited hours, I was sure he'd still be several times over the legal limit. But instead of cooperating, he stumbled out of the vehicle, shouting and jabbing a finger toward the darkness, several feet to my right, where he thought I was standing. You need to come with me, sir, I said calmly. It's not safe. I froze mid-sentence. That's when I saw it. His license plate. And everything else faded into the background. Marta's final voicemail echoed in my head. The vanity plate she mentioned, the one from the car that clipped her and kept driving, leaving her alone in the dark. No wonder I hadn't found it before. This plate wasn't from our state, it was from across the border. One extra character, and a clever variation on the phrase. Too clever to spot in a database search. I really looked at the man this time. Not the way I'd imagined him. Not a monster in the shadows. Just some intoxicated guy with zero concern for anyone but himself. Not someone evil, just completely indifferent. And somehow, that made it worse. I snapped out of it just in time to hear him shouting at me again, slurring his words. Telling me I could go away, forcefully. Maybe I'm wrong for what I did next. Maybe it says something about me. But I made a choice. I wish you a good evening, sir, I said. And then I got in my cruiser, started the engine, and drove away, turning off the lights as I did. In the rearview mirror, I watched as he started to wander. His steps were wobbly, erratic. And he was headed toward the fence. I didn't stay to watch. The next morning, the car was still there. The driver wasn't. I'm still wrestling with what I did. I tried to hand in my resignation. Told my supervisor everything. I told him the truth, I'd made a choice. I hadn't just failed to stop someone, I'd allowed it to happen. I told him I felt like I'd taken a life. He didn't see it that way. You did what you could, he said. You couldn't physically restrain him. You've saved far more lives than the one you lost. And just like that, it was over. So I stayed. But there's one more thing I haven't said. Yesterday, after helping another stranded motorist change a tire, I stood beside my cruiser for a moment before getting in. And that's when I heard them. Not just her voice. Voices. For the first time, Marta's soft, pleading tone had company. It was no longer a lonely call. Now, it was a chorus. A new voice joined hers, clear, sharp, unmistakable. No longer slurred or confused. It was his voice. The man from mile marker 192. The one I left behind. And together, their voices echoed from the woods behind the fence, whispering. Calling. Promising that I'll be joining them soon.